Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about updating your mobile device. And the reason being is because if you're not updating it, security flaws can creep in, and governments can actually exploit those flaws to monitor you. And that is exactly what happened according to multiple reports. And this is coming from Reuters. This is my primary source on this one, but a lot of people are actually talking about this in terms of news outlets. Now, what I'm talking about is Apple. Now, if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I actually did a video, maybe it was a week ago. I did a video on Apple's iPhone having multiple flaws that hackers could basically chain together and exploit this. Google's Project Zero found this, and they said this had been going on for about 2 years. Thousands of iPhones had been affected and all of this. They had disclosed this to Apple on February 1st, and Apple, within, I think it was something like 7 days, went ahead and released an emergency patch for all of the iPhones. And if you haven't updated your iPhone, please go do that. But we have some more information that's coming to light by virtue of this that I think is very interesting. Now, Apple, and I've got some notes here, about a week ago, confirmed that China's Uyghurs, now if you're not familiar with the Uyghurs, they are a very small minority in China that are actually Muslim. They are considered a security threat by the Beijing government. Apple confirmed that they had been targeted, the Uyghurs had been targeted basically for attacks and surveillance due to these iPhone security flaws. And I find that absolutely interesting that basically, let's say the Chinese government knew this, maybe they were, limiting the ability for the Uyghurs to update their phones over cellular networks because the Chinese government obviously controls the internet there. I've personally been there and seen that myself. It's rather interesting, the internet in China compared to, let's say, here in the United States. But here's the thing. Apple is disputing some of this. Not necessarily that the Uyghurs were targeted, but exactly what's going on with this flaw. Now, multiple organizations have reported on these flaws, as well as the Uyghurs. CNN, TechCrunch, Reuters, you take your pick. And like I said, I did a video on this. But here are my notes. Apple said, and this is according to Reuters and again, everybody else, said evidence suggested that the website attacks only lasted 2 months and not 2 years, which is what Google had suggested. And I quote Apple here, Google's post issued 6 months after iOS patches were released creates the false impression of mass exploitation to monitor the private activities of entire populations in real time. Now, Apple is basically saying this was never the case. And I think this is absolutely interesting because, one, I don't mind that Google released the news 6 months after. I think, in cybersecurity research, when we are finding flaws and we are, let's say, delivering that to an organization, we absolutely want to give them time, not just to figure out how to patch it and update their device, but also give them enough time to roll out updates. And when you've got millions and millions of iPhones and iPads with, let's say, a security vulnerability, it's going to take months to do this. And so I think Google actually played it right, by delaying it for that long before releasing that information, obviously giving Apple time to patch their global fleet of iPhones that they've sold. So I don't know why Apple would hit them over the head for that, in that sense. Also, Apple's marketing typically has basically been that we are so secure, you don't need things like antivirus, which they did remove in 2015, as well as firewalls, because they didn't want third-party AV or firewalls to get their hooks into their new operating system at the time, and that's really never come back. If you look at the fine print on an antivirus in the App Store, it pretty much does everything for you except actually scan for viruses. And so obviously, this is a huge issue, not to mention the fact that Google or Alphabet is Apple's primary rival in the phone market. And so that's pretty much kind of an egg on their face, situation here. But it's interesting because Google's obviously standing by their, by their results and all of that, saying that this is what it is. But I think there's something, that we really have to discuss here in a couple of different things. One, these flaws have been used to target populations, literally populations within a country for surveillance, and that means if the Chinese government can do it, for example, there's no reason why any other government couldn't do that. We've seen multiple cases where, we are spying on one government, or one government is spying on us, or, we all do it. Recently, it was just confirmed in a report by Politico that the Israeli government had put Stingray, these are devices that can monitor cell phones or mimic cell towers to get phones to connect it. They had put these things in Washington, D.C., to go ahead and surveil the president of the United States, and I'm sure we'd do it to them as well. The U.S. was caught, bugging Germany and Brazil. I think it was back in the George W. Bush era, or maybe it was Obama. I can't remember at this point. But the point is that when we have things like this, I think it's important to acknowledge it and understand that, no product is completely secure. And Apple is sitting here, I think, in some ways, trying to backpedal this. Now, they may be right. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure who to believe here. Google obviously, has a strategic advantage in underscoring the fact that the iPhone has flaws, while downplaying, potential flaws in the Android operating system. So there you go. But that is your news. The iPhone can be targeted, or was targeted, if you're not updating it, to basically surveil you and everybody like you, if your government deems it appropriate. Now, that said, the most important thing that you can do is update your mobile device. And I'm hoping that's what all of the Uyghurs have done, so that they can no longer be surveilled in that manner, because Lord knows, from what I understand, they're surveilled in many other ways. So take that for what it's worth, but that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.